Success can't fill the still. When the world claps for you, can you still hear yourself? I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, smart enough, long enough, one day the world would recognize it. And they did. I turned 22 standing under the lights of a crowded conference hall in San Francisco, delivering a keynote as one of the rising faces of America's new startup movement. Hundreds of eyes watched. Cameras followed my every move. My speech was reprinted word for word in a major magazine with the headline, "Victor Dominic, a new symbol of the American dream." I didn't know when I became a symbol. I just knew things were moving so fast, so smoothly, that I had no time to ask if it still felt like me. One week, I appeared in 3 major publications. Some nights, I had to choose between 3 different parties, each full of important people. I was invited to partner, to advise, to lead. They treated me like I had stepped out of a hit movie. And at 22, I won't lie, it felt exhilarating. No one teaches you how to manage being admired. No one tells you that some praise will make you forget what's real. No one warns you that when everyone claps, that's when you need to be most careful. I stood on stages telling stories of early failure and sudden success. But inside, I started feeling a gap between the voice speaking and the soul that once lived those stories. I was repeating my past like a polished script, and I watched myself from a distance, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. But the crowd clapped, so I smiled, shook hands, accepted another invitation. It felt like a game with no pause button. The better you played, the harder it was to walk away. Some nights, after the party ended, I sat alone in the corner of my room, looking up at the ceiling, still hearing the echo of music in my head. And I asked, was this what I dreamed of? Then said nothing, because right then, someone knocked on the door, inviting me to another party. I straightened my tie, opened the door, and returned to the world that kept cheering, just to avoid the voice inside whispering, "You're slowly disappearing." I used to be someone who thought fame proved my worth. I used to believe that the more people knew my name, the more I mattered. Every time my name appeared in a magazine, every time someone asked for a photo, every time I got an invitation to some global summit, it felt like proof that I deserved to be here. The photos in front of branded backdrops, the quotes of mine reshared on social media, the compliments like, "You're a role model for the next generation," they created something dangerously close to love, a kind of love that's addictive, because it comes from the crowd, and it comes daily. All I had to do was open a newspaper or check my inbox, and someone, somewhere, was calling my name. Who wouldn't want that feeling? I remember a girl once approached me after a talk. She nervously asked for an autograph, then said, "You're the only one who made me believe that introverts can create something big." I was moved, truly. But that moment was the beginning of something dangerous. I started to attach myself to the image people had of me, the inspirational speaker, the voice of a new generation, the one who never loses. And I began telling my own story in more polished, more perfect words, but also less honest ones. Because I was afraid of losing that image, afraid of letting people down, afraid that if the invitations stopped coming, if the shares disappeared, I'd be nothing. And that's when fame stopped being a gift and started being the only mirror I looked into. Not what I was learning, not what I was still holding on to, but only how many people know me this week. I used to be someone who believed being admired meant I was living right. But now, I know better. Because you can be admired by the whole world and no longer believe in yourself. A party full of lights and a void inside. I used to dream of the day I'd walk among the famous. And one night, that dream came true, but not the way I expected. It was a rooftop party at a 5-star hotel in Hollywood. Not one of those crowded open invites. This was private. If your name wasn't on the list, you didn't make it past the glass doors. A friend in media got me in. Before we stepped inside, he leaned over and whispered, "Just smile and walk like you matter. No one here asks who you are if you look like someone." So I did. Chin up, handshakes at the right time, smiles just enough. To my surprise, I blended in perfectly. Around me were millionaire founders, film producers, magazine cover models. Glasses clinked, laughter flowed, small talk spun in circles. I held my champagne, nodded politely, and heard my name mentioned, the rising tech star. And I smiled, because I thought this was everything I'd wanted. Then something small happened. A moment I remember more clearly than anything else, though no one else even noticed. A well-known director turned to me and asked, "So, what does success mean to you?" I opened my mouth, ready to launch into a perfectly polished TED Talk answer. But I froze, because I realized I didn't have one. I said something generic, sipped my drink, then looked around the room, and I saw everyone here, including me, was working hard to look flawless. The conversations lacked depth. The hugs lacked warmth. The compliments lacked honesty. And I, still smiling politely, felt like something inside me was being quietly drained. A quiet question crept in. If I lost the startups, the articles, the spotlight, would anyone here still want to sit next to me? That question haunted me for the rest of the night. But I didn't show it. I kept smiling, kept clinking glasses, kept exchanging cards. The only difference was, for the first time, I felt like I was playing a role I no longer believed in. And that was when the gap began, between what I did and what I truly felt, between the lights outside and the quiet voice within. A gap I was starting to fear looking at directly. Outer glory can't replace inner meaning. After that rooftop party, I started noticing something. Something small, quiet, but impossible to unfeel. I still attended conferences, still took the stage, still spoke fluently, still got applause, but every time it ended, something in me felt a little more hollow, like I'd just performed a role that no longer moved me. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe it was the pace, the pressure, the constant spotlight. But no, that emptiness didn't vanish after rest. It didn't go away after praise. And then I realized I wasn't speaking about the things that made me feel alive anymore. I still talked about projects, technology, strategy, success stories everyone wanted to hear. But I no longer spoke about the nights I coded until sunrise, about the reason I started, about the joy that used to make me cry. I got caught in a world where everyone had to sound like they knew everything, had to have answers, had to look like they had it all together. And I got good at playing that part. So good, I sometimes forgot it was just a part. Only when I was alone. No stage, no lights, could I hear the silence in my own stories. I started asking myself, am I trading what's real for what looks good? Am I living by my own values? Or just living up to someone else's idea of success? There was no loud answer. Just a slow ache I couldn't ignore anymore. I still worked, still planned expansions, still signed new deals. But at night, the spark was gone. And what I slowly came to understand was this: lights can make you visible, but only meaning can make you feel alive. And when the lights go out, if there's nothing left inside, you'll be left with nothing. Live for them or live for myself? I started feeling pressure from the very things I once dreamed of. I started fearing that I was no longer enough. Every day, someone expected me to show up on time, say the right things, inspire the right way, succeed on schedule. And I delivered. But slowly, I began losing myself to those expectations. Once, a colleague told me, "Victor, you're a role model. You can't afford to look weak in public." I smiled, nodded, then went back to my hotel room and stared at the wall for nearly an hour. I didn't know if I was really okay. All I knew was, if I disappeared tomorrow, there'd be an article asking, "What's going on with Victor Dominic?" So I showed up, even when all I wanted was to vanish for a while. Somewhere along the way, every time I opened my mouth, I heard a voice in my head whisper, "What will people think if you say this?" I wasn't speaking for myself anymore. I was speaking for the crowd, living for the crowd, smiling how they liked, answering how they expected. I became the ideal version of myself, but no longer me. And in that moment, a crack began to open inside me. One part wanted to preserve the image people loved. Another part just wanted to go home, have dinner with my parents, and do nothing. But I didn't dare. I feared that if I stepped back, everything would fall apart. I feared silence, feared absence, feared being forgotten. That inner conflict became constant, unseen, unspoken, because on the outside, I still looked fine, still performed, still received applause. But inside, I no longer knew who I was living for. Living for the crowd costs you yourself. I used to believe that the more people loved me, the more I was living right. But I was wrong, because you can please everyone and still not know who you are. When you live surrounded by applause, you start to believe that without it, you're nothing. So you try harder, perform better, polish your image, just to keep the crowd's affection. I walked straight into that trap. No one pushed me. I did it to myself. Once, a close friend asked, "Victor, do you still write anything just for yourself these days?" I went quiet because the answer was no. I hadn't written in my journal in months. No spontaneous notes. No raw thoughts. Only the things that could be quoted, shared, polished enough for publication. I stopped asking myself hard questions because I didn't want the answers. I was afraid of seeing the emptiness, afraid to realize I was living by someone else's script. So I avoided it, stayed in rooms where people praised me, instead of spaces where someone might ask, "Victor, are you still living true to yourself?" I began to feel lost inside my own success. It's hard to explain because everything looked fine, but inside, something was slowly wearing down. And the lesson arrived like a quiet, undeniable truth. If you live for the crowd too long, you forget how to live for yourself. Waking up and not knowing who you are. I used to think hitting rock bottom meant losing everything. But I was wrong. Sometimes, rock bottom comes right when everything is going well. At that time, my company was about to sign a major distribution deal with a European conglomerate. One of our biggest investors decided to double down, not because they deeply understood the roadmap, but because Victor is still the face people trust. The press kept calling me a phenomenon at 22. A television producer even floated the idea of giving me my own show. But somewhere beneath all the invitations, contracts, and camera flashes, I stopped sleeping. Not from stress, but because I no longer knew what I was waking up for. One night, after a networking dinner in New York, I got back to my hotel, drank a glass of water, laid on the bed, then woke up at 3 a.m. No noise, no emails, just the faint glow of a bedside lamp and a blank ceiling above. I lay there for a long time, then asked myself, if there were no meetings, no headlines, no applause tomorrow, would I still exist? It sounds like a simple question, but that night, it hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked around the room, a suitcase still unpacked, laptop open, dozens of unread emails, blazer hanging crooked over the chair. Everything looked in place, except me. I couldn't remember the last time I truly felt joy. Not the kind you get from closing a deal. Not the kind from someone saying, "You inspire me." But the quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing you're living in alignment with yourself. It had been too long. I closed my eyes, didn't sleep, just felt an emptiness rise from inside. No shape, no name, just there, and impossible to ignore. I once thought I'd break under failure, but there's another kind of collapse, softer, quieter, that happens when you achieve everything others dream of and feel nothing. No one sees it. No one knows. Because on the outside, I was still rising. The money was flowing. The deals kept coming. The interviews kept calling. Only I knew. Inside, I was drifting. All your achievements mean nothing if you've lost touch with yourself. I started working more, not because I had to, but because working was the only way I felt whole. Every contract signed, Every strategy session that stretched into the night, every tough client I managed to win over, they all made me feel alive. I still loved the work, still felt a thrill watching timelines move forward, solving tough technical problems, turning rough ideas from my team into real results. Inside that rhythm, everything made sense. I had a reason to wake up early, a list of things to do, no room to think about anything beyond execution. Only when I paused did the silence creep in, waiting at the airport gate, in a hotel room, alone after midnight, staring at the mirror and not seeing the same light in my eyes. That's when the weariness arrived. Not physical fatigue, but a quieter drift, as if I was doing everything right, except for the one thing that mattered most: being real with myself. I knew that feeling was there, but I chose not to look at it. I chose the next meeting, the next project, the next email, not because I hated my work. Quite the opposite. I still believed in what I was building, but somewhere beneath that passion, I was using it as a shield, a barrier between me and the thing I wasn't brave enough to face. From the outside, I was the textbook example of a rising star, a company expanding into 3 new markets, a government-funded education platform, a growing team behind me. But only I knew, when the room returned to silence, one question always came back: and what about me? A part of me shrinking in silence, but still holding on. I started living in a way that said, just don't fall apart. No need to thrive. No need to be inspired. Just maintain. Hold it together. Some mornings, I walked into the office with a strange quiet inside. People still smiled at me. The coffee still smelled good. The inbox still overflowed with possibilities. And I smiled back. No one knew that behind that smile was a man who had stopped expecting anything from life, except stability. I was still doing well. In fact, better than ever. This quarter's report showed 17% growth. An online learning platform I invested in was being piloted by the federal government. Each week brought new partnership offers from cities I'd never visited. But I didn't tell those stories with the same fire anymore. They became bullet points. Not the kind of triumphs that used to keep me up all night, buzzing with joy. Instead of celebrating, I started recording as if I were managing a portfolio, not living a life. Everything was right, but nothing was deep. Everything was enough, but nothing was real. I was still surviving, but I wasn't sure I was still living the way I once believed in. I started journaling again. Not every day, but enough. Enough to listen to myself. Each sentence was a test, a way to measure how honest I could still be. There was one line I wrote, erased, then wrote again. Am I living true? I didn't have the answer, but the question was enough. Enough to keep me from sliding further. Enough to remind me something inside hadn't fully died. Emptiness is not the end. It's a warning. Nothing collapsed. There was no breakdown, no depression, no dramatic quitting. Everything continued just as it was supposed to. I kept getting invited to speak, kept making those 30 under 30 lists, kept being held up as the symbol of a bold, tech-driven generation. One article called me mind and a mission the youth could believe in. And strangely, I didn't disagree. I smiled, nodded, thanked them, and walked into my next meeting. No one knew that the emptiness in me, though still formless, was quietly eating away at everything that once fueled me. Not a loud collapse, but a slow fading, like sunlight slipping behind trees, not noticed until the dark has already arrived. I still worked, still made decisions, still delivered results. But I stopped asking what was real. Just stay on track. Just don't fail. That was how I stayed afloat, by dissolving into a system I no longer felt I belonged to. I once believed that with enough clarity and discipline, I'd never lose my way. But I didn't realize, sometimes you don't get lost because you turned the wrong direction, but because you kept walking too long down a road you no longer believed in. And by the time you notice, you've gone too far to turn back.
I once asked my father, "How do you know you're heading in the wrong direction? If everyone around you says you're doing great?" He went quiet for a long time, then said something that didn't feel like an answer just for me. When you start needing things outside to fill something inside, that's when it's time to pause. He was 22 that year, and even if no one saw it, I believe he was already tired. Not from failure, but from holding up a perfect image, while something inside was beginning to unravel. There are phases in life when you don't collapse, but you're not really standing either. You just keep walking, because you don't know where else to go. I don't blame him for continuing. No one ever taught him how to stop. And sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who hide it best. I just hope that if you're walking through a place that no longer moves you, you'll pause, even just to breathe, even just to ask, am I still living true? Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us, everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.